Hello, I'm Dr. Ron Eaglin, and I'm going to take you through a lecture on jQuery, which is kind of a shadow of a lecture that I've done previously, which is creating a menu using jQuery. And it's going to be essentially the same menu from one of the sites that I like to use, which is JavaScript Array. And this is going to be creating the same menu, however, this time using jQuery and showing you some of the capabilities of jQuery. So first, this is the basically blank unordered list version of the menu. This isn't really a menu so much as it's an unordered list, and I can actually show you the code for this right here. This code is simply a set of unordered list and list items. So you have an unordered list with a list item that embeds another unordered list, okay, and another list item with another unordered list, and then three list items that don't have embedded ULs inside of them. Now, what we want to show, however, is how to take this and turn it into a menu. So this is what the menu would look like, and it looks very much like another menu that I've done in a previous lecture, where I have this little drop down and then I can move the mouse off and it hovers for a second and then disappears. The difference between this one and the first one was this one is done with jQuery. So I'm going to take you through essentially the jQuery code and how it interacts here. Now, if you've been watching the series on jQuery, you'll note that one of the things you always seem to have in every jQuery is this document ready, where I use a selector to get the document, and then ready, and then I use the function operation, and then in that function I do some stuff. Now, here's what I'm going to do. Here's the stuff that I'm going to do, and this is the important thing to learn here. Is first I'm going to use the selector operator, and in the selector operator I'm going to find this an item on the web page that has the ID JSDMM. Now, this item that has the JSDMM is this unordered list down here. It's unordered list ID JSDMM, and it's the same one that you had with the list items and the unordered list inside of it. Now, this has then this other thing here, which is this little greater than sign and then an LI. And what this does is it's within a selector. This is an operator that says find the first child that is of this type, LI. So if I'm looking at JSDMM here, okay, and I've got this here, and then I've got this, I'm finding the child LI. So it's going to find a child here. And in the case of selection, it can find all of the list items, but they have to be a first order child of the unordered list. Well, that's okay because this one and this one and this one and this one, there's 5 unordered lists that are first order children of that. In other words, they're not grandchildren, they're children. All right, so what do you do when you find these things? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bind an event to a function. This is the dot bind. The dot bind is a basically method that JavaScript, jQuery defines, where I take the mouse over and I bind it to a function. And then the mouse out is then bound to another function. So those are the things I'm going to do in the document when you load the document. So what that means is that every time you find a child of JSDMM or JSDDM that is a list item, okay, it's bound to this mouse over and it's going to call this function. So let's look at the functions. JSDMM open. Okay, this first function, JSDMM open, calls a cancel timer. It closes any previous menus that might be open, and then it sets the current menu item, which by the way is a global variable, the DD menu item, to be equal to this. Okay, well, this is, okay, the LI. That's what this is. It refers to the specific list item that was called down here when you bound it. So this is the item that you're looking at. Then I call .find UL. Now what it's going to do is it's going to find the objects that are children of that list item that are of type UL. Okay, well, if you look at this list item, you've got one item there that is an unordered list, and there is only one, but this is now the item that is going to be selected. Okay, and in this case, the .eq is actual equals, and this 0 is an index. So essentially what you're saying is find the first unordered list underneath the list item. Okay, well, so this whole thing here, this whole thing right here is going to return the first unordered list that is a child element of the list item that was passed to this, that was the current list item. Okay, very simple, straightforward nomenclature to do this. Well, since that in itself is an element that is a unordered, in this case it's an unordered list, I can set the CSS changes the style of, or actually allows you to set the style of that element. So I'm going to set the style of that element, and the style I'm going to change is the visibility, and I'm going to change it to visible. So when you look at this function JSDM underscore close, well, I set DD menu item to be equal to this, and I set the visibility here, but at the same time this whole thing is going to return that specific item that you had there. So when I use this if DDM menu item here, if checks to see if it exists, it can now set that visibility to hidden. So when I call close, I'm actually making it hidden. And when I call open, I'm actually making it visible. So what I'm making visible is this section that's in here. I'm going to go back over here and look at this. So now when I hover over this, mouse over, I have this section here which is visible. Now all the formatting here is specifically formatting that's done with cascading style sheets. Okay, so now what else can we do here? There's only a few other things that occur here. I open and close the menu items, and all this is handled right here and here, and all the binding to make this happen is handled in here in the document ready. So the only thing I've got left to do is the timer. And the timer is simple, simply saying that, okay, when I have the mouse over it and I pull the mouse out, it hovers for half a second. Now I can change that. I'm going to go up here and make it 2 seconds so you can kind of see a little bit better. Now if I reload this and I come down here and I come over here and I hover out, 1, 2, disappear. Okay, so it's just that timer. And what you do simply in this case is you do 2 things. One is you set the timeout. Okay, when the JSDDM timer function is called, you set the timeout to call the close function after the period of time specified in the timeout, which, by the way, that was 2,000 milliseconds or 2 seconds. Okay, so you call the JSDDM close, and that just simply sets the visibility to hidden. The other thing that you do here is that you cancel the timer. And what you do when you want to open another menu item is you don't want to wait 2 seconds for the menu item that you might have open to close. And so cancel timer simply clears the timeout and allows you to close the window immediately. So when I put all of this together, you can see it's relatively straightforward. The jQuery portion of this is right here where I have the selector, and right here where I have the selector, and right here where I have the selector. And it's simply a different method that you've seen before of doing the same thing that you saw with using JavaScript. What it does allow me to do is have this code down here is now very, very clean. In my previous JavaScript example, I actually had to have calls and tell what functions I needed called down here. And I don't need that anymore. I can set this all up here with a nice clean syntax for the selector. So as you can see, this is a relatively straightforward and easy to follow example of using jQuery to do a menu. So hopefully you'll research more into jQuery and look at the different methods and functions, but this can get you started in looking at some of the things that you can do with jQuery. Thank you very much, and good programming.